Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the year is 1579 and welcome to Japan. Welcome to Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm recording this after about 12 hours of playtime. It's the 10th of March, so 10 days away from public release, 8 days until the embargo lifts. Chris, Declan and I are very fortunate to have been offered review codes by Ubisoft so we could start experiencing this game and preparing our content, so a big thanks to the Assassin's Creed community team for the codes. First, a note on spoilers. This is a first impressions video. I'm not going to talk about main story points. I'm not even going to show you any video footage from the story, so you can watch this knowing that nothing is going to be spoiled. All of the B-roll you see here will be from open world exploration, synchronization points and minor encounters. Things that are nice to look at and will give you a feel for the world, but without spoiling anything. Throughout this video, please keep in mind that these are first impressions. After 20 or 30 hours, or maybe after completing a New Game Plus, I might have a completely different opinion of the story, gameplay, or the entire game. My reason for writing this now is I think it's good to have a marker that I can reflect on later. Also, I'm getting old, and if I don't take notes, I will forget. Shadows is a fascinating game for fans, and it is a crucial game for Ubisoft. The entire gaming industry has been going through a tough time as it adjusts to an extended downturn from the industry peak of 2021. Ubisoft hasn't had a hit release in a long time, with Avatar and Star Wars Outlaws both failing to make a splash. So Shadows needs to be well received and it needs to sell well. But there's more here than just those industry-wide trends. Zooming into the franchise that we care about, Assassin's Creed has been going through a quiet reinvention, perhaps even a revolution, since Valhalla's release in 2020. Much of that is invisible to the outside, but we've had glimpses via news articles and from Marc-Alexis Cote's recent BAFTA presentation. Ubisoft has gone through an internal reorganisation between Montreal and Quebec. There's a central leadership team for the brand now. Many other Ubisoft franchises are seemingly dormant, with more and more resources focusing on their cash cow, and Shadows is the matriarch at the head of this herd. We're into Period 3 of Assassin's Creed now. Period 1 covering Assassin's Creed 1 to Syndicate, Period 2 covering Origins to Mirage. Shadows brings a new modern day, a new technical platform, a new method of telling the modern day story. Dual protagonists are back, and from what I've observed so far, Shadows brings a shake-up of the classic Ubisoft formula. I'm going to be honest, I know Ubisoft games get a lot of flack and I do understand some of the criticisms, but you know what? I quite like an open world full of mysteries and things to do. Are Ubisoft games junk food? Yeah, maybe, but sometimes I like to eat a nice takeaway. Is Odyssey's story as deep as Cyberpunk's? No, it isn't. But that's okay. Sometimes I just want to rip through some bad guys while looking cool and doing cool shit. So look, I approach Shadows as an optimist. I'm probably going to like it. I'm probably going to enjoy it. So with the scene set, let's get into it. I just want to mention briefly hardware specs. This is a demanding game on PC. My PC runs a Ryzen 7 7800 X3D and an RTX 3090. These are no longer the latest and greatest in processors and graphics cards, but these are still very, very powerful PCs, and this game is demanding. I cannot run this game at 4K 60, even on medium settings with aggressive upscaling. I've picked a mixture of settings that targets about 45 FPS while keeping the quality high, so just be aware, PC gamers, that you'll need to spend some time finding settings that give you that good mix of performance and quality. I also have a PlayStation code and was able to play for a time on PlayStation. The game looks good, but there is a noticeable downgrade in the visuals compared to PC. The effects of FSR upscaling are clearly visible. I am happy to see that the devs included a 40 FPS mode for Shadows. 40 FPS is a really nice compromise, giving smoother gameplay, smoother performance, but also allowing for more image quality than a 60 FPS target, so this is a really good inclusion by the team. Let's talk about world and exploration. We're getting to the bit that you probably already know. Shadows is stunningly beautiful. All Assassin's Creed games are beautiful. Origins with its stark white deserts of the south and craggy mountains of the Roman west, Odyssey with its azure seas and bold golden sun, Valhalla with its pastel colour palette and soft lighting, Mirage with its crystal shimmering air. Shadows is new, Shadows is next gen, and oh boy, this game has the softest lighting effects, the softest diffusion effects I've ever seen. I've never seen sunlight passing through a foggy forest look as good as it looked here in Shadows. I was exploring the opening region and I came to a wide lazy river. Cranes were diving for fish, a few boats were passing downstream, the grass was waving in the breeze. I looked up and I saw the bluest sky I have ever seen. And you might say, well, yeah, that's just a blue skybox, so what? And the problem is I can't really describe it, and YouTube's compression will likely wreck any detail in this B-roll, but there was a depth to the colour, almost a lilac hint that made it look even more blue. This isn't just a generic skybox, or if it is, it's a very well done skybox. When the weather's bad, Noe's clothes and hair get wet and her robes are billowed and bashed about by the storms. Rain runs down the roads and lightning flashes in treacherous skies. Side note, Noe's hair animations are probably the best I've seen in a video game. Do you remember how in Odyssey you could drive Phobos in a straight line between pretty much any 2 points on the map? You could ride your 4-wheel drive horse over all of Greece like you were playing Uncharted 4's Madagascar section without missing a beat? You could do the same in Valhalla, except for the presence of horse stamina, which pulled you back from exploring Valhalla's beautiful open world. Well, the good news is horse stamina is gone. Your horse can swim, so all of Valhalla's horse-related bullshit is gone, and that is great. Unlike Odyssey, you cannot just go as the crow flies here. Japan is a mountainous and heavily forested country, and Ubisoft creates that here in Shadows. The world is absolutely packed with greenery, trees, shrubs, bamboo. Off the main roads, the forests are so dense it's actually impossible to see through them and very, very difficult to move through them. So you will be sticking to the roads, and you might think that makes the world less interesting, or this means there's less to do, but you are not missing out. Because there are no wealth chests or mysteries in these forested areas. Ubisoft has really stripped back that checklist approach that they've had in previous games. These forested areas are vertical and verdant backdrops to a stunning world. World exploration is driven by sync points and the observe mechanic, which you've probably already seen. As I mentioned, Shadows does not pepper its HUD with question marks or shower its map with glowing dots, and this is a change for the good. You will need to get to a high spot to find points of interest in the world, and only those you mark will remain visible once you've jumped from your vantage point. The HUD is very clean. Of course it can be fully customised. Even the quest log itself minimises to a single line of text. You can bring up more clues with a key press. I think feedback from prior games has been taken on board. Shadow strips away a lot of the visual noise and allows the protagonist and the beautiful world to take the centre stage. And as you ride on those roads, the aforementioned wealth chests and mysteries have been replaced with very stripped back and hidden encounters. There might be bandits or ronin, or someone who needs help repairing a cart or a shrine. None of this is marked on the map, and the absence of question marks or glowing dots immediately changes your interaction and perception of the world. These are not encounters that are already happening, pre-scripted. The absence of map markers means you find them at the same moment that Naue does, and immediately the world becomes more real and Naue feels like she's inhabiting a living world. Shrines are unmarked interaction points. I recommend stopping at shrines to pray because you'll receive a temporary character buff. I don't know how or if this will evolve because I'm writing this based on exploring a single region, but everything I've observed here is a positive step forward in design. The old Ubisoft checklist has been replaced by encouraging exploration and engagement with the world. I won't say too much about the story because I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to keep my comments brief here. If you have an opinion that Quebec games are light-hearted and just not serious enough to be proper Assassin's Creed games, I can tell you that Shadows does not have the emotion and tone of Syndicate or Odyssey. Right now, Shadows does not feel quite like any other Assassin's Creed game. Perhaps Origins is closest. Shadows is a deadly serious story, and it opens with a story of Naue's pain. As the player, you're going to feel that pain and that loss, and you're going to play through that pain as you explore Act 1. I do think the opening hour was a little rough, might be too harsh a word. There were some character and time jumps that you really need to focus on to absorb it all. I was taking notes to refer back to later. The writers likely had a more difficult job than in some other AC games, introducing two protagonists, tutorializing the main systems and starting the narrative. But after a few hours, the game and its story settled. Definitely clear yourself 1 to 1.5 hours to really focus on the opening dialogue, the characters and the acting and the cutscenes in that prologue. There's a lot here, both spoken and unspoken. I'll finish this section by saying that the more I played Act 1, the various dialogues and flashbacks, the more I came to respect the storytelling and the structure and the overall tone. Things are much improved with cinematics. From what I've observed so far, there's a consistent visual and cinematic style to every conversation, whether it's main story or minor conversation. I completed a main story mission built around a tea ceremony, and with the visual style and that consistency and the mission type, it all worked together, and I became very absorbed into that scene. The mission required careful observation of facial expressions, and I can report that facial animations are much improved over the low points of Mirage and Valhalla. These scenes did have one slightly jarring point for me. They seem to be locked at 30 FPS, so if you're on PC or your frame rate is determined by your hardware, that frame rate change can take a moment to adjust to, but as I played more and more, I adapted to their style and I no longer noticed the difference. Cinematic quality, or maybe consistency, has been an area of criticism of Assassin's Creed games for a long time, and I really respect the team for improving it here. I still think the facial animations are a bit behind the best in the industry. I would call out Cyberpunk 2077 as probably having the best character and cinematic animations, but Shadows has taken a big step forward here and probably more closely aligned with their peers or near peers. On the gameplay topic, I won't say too much here because other way more intelligent people will cover gameplay in far more depth than I can. Combat and stealth will all feel very familiar to anyone who has played the RPG Creeds. There are some new mechanics which you've seen. Enemies have armour that must be removed, and the animations here are well done with helmets or breastplates clattering to the floor. For Naue, ranged is via kunai or shuriken only. Melee offers the usual light and heavy attacks, dodge and parry. Posture attacks are new and they're basically a charged light attack, but where it gets interesting is different enemies will actually read and react to different attack types. Some will always dodge a heavy, others will always dodge a posture attack. There's a lot to learn here and I'm just starting. All the usual Assassin's Creed hitbox combat systems are here, but it has evolved, and that evolution is good. Time will tell if combat continues to evolve as the game continues. Valhalla and Odyssey both offered a wide range of active and passive abilities to keep things interesting, and Odyssey in particular had a detailed character build system that was very flexible, allowing players to customise their playstyle. It's too early to say if Shadows will offer that customisation and keep players interested 40, 50, 60 hours in. After about 8 hours, I turned Guaranteed Assassination on, because it's just really frustrating without it. I started with the setting off because I wanted to play as the devs intended, but Naue, she can't one-shot assassinate brutes. There are skills available to unlock this, but they are a lot further up the skill tree. And honestly, I was getting fed up with early encounters spiralling into melees that Naue is unlikely to survive. Those spearmen have a very long reach. Making that choice does nullify some of the skill tree, but it was just getting annoying. I may revert that setting back in the future. All the usual stealth systems are here. I won't break them down much because they'll feel very familiar, but going prone is cool. Sprinting and then holding the prone button to have Naue throw herself bodily onto the ground into cover never gets old. I do want to mention the shadows themselves. There's a soft sigh of audio feedback as Naue moves into the shadows and hides, and she's marked by a slim white outline. I don't have anything useful to say here, but it's really damn cool when you see it working. You can be in the direct eye line of a guard, but crouched in the shadows and they will not see you, and it feels so good. You are literally that whisper of death in the shadows. Photo mode has had its first major overhaul since Odyssey upgraded Origins photo mode way back in 2018. There are some nice filters, The manual control over the shutter is welcome, but for keyboard and mouse players in particular, photo mode is rough to use. There's no way to lock the camera while you fiddle with other adjustments, so you have to take your hand completely away from the mouse, then use the keyboard to adjust various sliders. And having made these adjustments, if you want to tweak the camera, I hope you have a steady hand, because you're likely to knock your perfectly aligned shot out. There's also not enough granularity with the focal distance. It's 1 meter stops only, so framing your subject and getting the focus and depth of field right is not easy. I was also surprised to see there are no value add features like manual control over time of day or poses or facial expressions for your character. The new photo mode is a good start and it is an upgrade for previous games, but I honestly think more work is needed here to really give virtual photographers that next gen set of photo tools. I'm still getting familiar with all the various systems like skill points and knowledge points. I haven't really internalized it all yet, so all I can say is it's fine. That sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise, but I'm not. It's fine. I do wonder if it's more complex than it needs to be. Do we need knowledge levels as well as skill trees? I don't know. I did make one very stupid noob mistake. After about 9 hours of play, I was level 11, but I was finding combat increasingly difficult. I opened the menus to work out what I was doing wrong. Perhaps I needed better gear. Yeah, I wasn't level 11. I was level 10 and I had 11 unspent skill points. What a muppet. I do find with skill trees in games they can suffer from the paradox of choice. There are so many options here that I don't know where to start, and other key problem with skill trees is I've been playing for a few hours. How do I know what skills I will need in 10 hours time or 20 hours time? Will I prefer the katana or the tanto? Should I min-max in a couple of skill areas? And that lack of foresight can result in paralysis. So with all these unspent skill points, I did what I always do in games nowadays. I just unlocked every single tier 1 skill, both passive and active, and funnily enough, combat and stealth immediately became a lot easier. The point of that paragraph isn't to blame the devs or any such nonsense. That was squarely on me, but this situation did teach me a few things. The passive buffs in your skill tree do make a difference that you can feel, and that is good. The HUD design, again, has changed a lot since Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla. No more are you constantly reminded of your unspent skill points, and you might say, yeah, James, actually you needed that reminder, and you're right, but I prefer the stripped back HUD. Third and most important, Shadows allows you to respec skill points at any time with no cost, and this is brilliant. It lets us play and it lets us experiment. So how does the skill tree work? Well, skills are tiered into knowledge ranks. You need to reach the next knowledge rank to use the skills in that rank. Knowledge ranks are upgraded by earning knowledge points, which are earned by doing specific tasks in the world. Active and passive skills are intermixed with different actives and passive accessible at different knowledge ranks. The sum here is that players will need to engage with a wide range of world activities to keep upgrading their knowledge rank in order to activate new skills, both active and passive. I think the lesson learned here is explore widely and respec your points to experiment with different abilities and playstyles.
It'll be less trouble if I stay out of sight.
I started by playing on PC with keyboard and mouse for the first 8 or so hours, and the controls are complex. C, which historically was crouch and parkour down in Mirage, is now prone and crouch, but it's not parkour down. That's a separate button input which I've struggled to find a home for. So I was not using parkour down, and that got me into trouble several times. I needed to find better manual keybinds to make this work because I wasn't using movement as well as I could have been, and that was limited by my control scheme. I know others in the community with early access are also struggling to find better control schemes on controllers. It does sort of feel like this game almost has too many commands for too few physical buttons. R2 is the key one here, I think. Remember in Mirage and Valhalla before that, it wasn't always clear if Basim and Eivor, if they were sprinting, so you needed that physical input that you could hold so you could be certain your character was sprinting. Well, you definitely need a clear keybind for sprint, because sprinting is a vital part of Naoe and Yasuke's movement. Yasuke can sprint through doors and bash them open. Naoe is a glass cannon, so sprinting away is absolutely going to be required. The good news in Shadows is that unlike Valhalla and Mirage, the character animations are clearly different between a jog and a sprint. So you will know if you are sprinting or not, and you don't necessarily need that physical feedback loop that R2 gives you. I still don't really like using L3 for sprinting, it just always feels oddly unpleasant, but for now I'm going with it and it is working. If you want to use R2 just for style points, then I think that will cascade to needing a lot of other controller changes. Let's talk parkour. I think the only way to talk about parkour is starting with expectations. Knowing that Japan at the time was mostly mountains, forests and then towns with 1 or 2 story buildings, I did not go into Shadows expecting AC1 or even Unity levels of movement. You've probably already seen the various gameplay clips, so I'm not disappointed. It is exactly what I expected. It has not really changed very much from the RPG creeds. Go up, go down, side jumps, grappling hook. I haven't tried anything advanced because of time pressures, but also because the keyboard mouse experience of parkour is actually quite frustrating. I have to assume the parkour engine is tuned for the more gentle and less precise movements of controller sticks rather than the precision of a mouse. I have since switched to controller and the movement is definitely more satisfying to use, with different moves easier to access. So your own experience of parkour is going to depend on what you were expecting or what you were hoping for. This is not Assassin's Creed 1. I do observe one specific parkour problem. The world is full of Japanese buildings. Yeah, I know that's a surprise. But the point I'm getting to is these are buildings of great geometric complexity, different surfaces interfacing, lots of tiny carved details, rows of rooftops that frequently change height. This isn't the simple flat roofs of Egypt or Greece or England. And I've observed Naue getting stuck on geometry or latching on and then falling off, or latching on and then floating upwards more often than in any game since Unity. Now I know that's a dramatic statement, bearing in mind Unity's history, and I'm not saying movement is unreliable or terrible, but it has got its own quirks, and like Unity and newer games, I think as your skill builds, you'll learn to spot those tricky geometry areas and avoid them. The Monde is present, both as an intro scene and in the Animus Hub menu. I won't give any spoilers, but I'll just mention that right now, after a couple of modern day interludes, it most closely reminds me of Unity's intro and modern day structure, with a sprinkling of liberations. And the intro certainly starts strong. It sets the scene and it establishes some mystery. It looks like we're going to unlock new segments of modern day story as we play and explore, and that's interesting too. But honestly, we're at the start of a new phase of Assassin's Creed, Period 3. Could anyone in 2007 have seen how the modern day story would evolve up to Desmond's conclusion in Assassin's Creed 3, or how many different approaches to modern day we would see from Black Flag to Mirage? I think the most balanced comment to make right now is it is far too early to say how this modern day will play out. And with the franchise's new direction, we likely won't be able to judge the modern day and properly reflect back on Shadows until we have the benefit of hindsight in years' time. So modern day is here, it's potentially interesting, but it's going to need the focus of multiple writing teams over many years for us to properly judge it. This was supposed to be a short first impressions video, but I did want to take the time to explain every point, so 20 or so minutes later, here we are. I did find the opening hour of story a little confusing at times. It reminded me a little bit of Origins as we jumped around between timelines and characters, and I was feeling a little uneasy, I must admit. But as the story settles, as the gameplay opens up, we are off into a beautiful recreation of Japan. All the usual stealth and melee options are present, correct, but evolved and improved. Story is good, backstory is fleshed out in a way that I thought was really engaging, and I really enjoyed it, and those cinematics have a significant upgrade. Overall, I'm feeling very positive about Shadows. Alright, this is Future James adding a little epilogue to this video. I've been taking notes and then writing and editing this script over the past 4 or 5 days, while also continuing to play the game. So after 15 hours played, I have reached the conclusion of Act 1. I've added this little epilogue because I want to add something important. I'm not going to spoil anything about Act 1 or its denouement, except to say the conclusion in terms of story, character, acting, emotion was excellent. I am very impressed. I might even go so far as to say that this is one of the strongest opening acts that we've had in an Assassin's Creed game. Now that the act is concluded, I can look back on some of my earlier impressions and notes and say that I understand now how the prologue was constructed, how Act 1 was constructed to kind of tell that story and build us up to that conclusion. So I just wanted to add that epilogue here.